Is John Wesley's encouragement to make all you can, save all you can, and give all you can good advice for pastors today? We'll talk about that in this episode of the More Than a Pastor Show. Let's get started. Hello, my friend. Welcome to the More Than a Pastor Show. I'm Rich Avery, your host. This is the show where we help pastors, missionaries, and other ministry leaders to grow your income and build financial security. We'll help you take your skills, experiences, and ministry know-how and leverage them into sustainable income outside the church through a business or a side hustle that's right for you so you can serve God and provide for your family no matter what. Hey, thanks so much for joining me today. I always appreciate the time we get to spend together. And if you're new to the show, you can learn more about me, get the show notes, the blog post for this episode, and download some free resources to help you grow your income and build financial security. You'll find it all at my website at morethanapastor.com/68 for episode 68. Hey, I hope you're doing well and enjoying a good season of life and ministry right now. I myself am getting over a cold. I had the privilege of being in Costa Rica a few weeks back, and coming back the next day, I just have had this head cold, and it's been lingering and sticking around for 2 weeks now. So I've still got some head congestion and chest congestion. So hopefully it won't be bothering us too much here on this episode, but just want to let you know if you think, oh, he's a little bit more raspy or wheezy than normal, that is why. But yeah, I had a great time in Costa Rica. It was my first time there. I was working with a group of about 30 pastors from the Association of Bible Churches there in Costa Rica. And it was helping them learn how to model and foster a culture of generous stewardship within their congregations and their communities so they can be more sustainable financially as churches and not dependent upon outside funding, maybe from America or other places. And so we had the workshop at a Christian retreat campground type place in the northern part of Costa Rica. And it was beautiful and lush and green. It was like rainforest area. There were volcanoes that you could see in the not too far distance, and just a really beautiful place. I wished I would have had some time. I didn't have any extra time really to do any touring or sightseeing. There were toucans that I could see. I saw one flying not too far from our location where we were, out in some woods nearby. And I tried to hike through those woods a little bit on 2 occasions to see if I could see some toucans up close. Also, I was hoping to see some sloths and some capybaras. They are in that area as well, but was not able to see any of those, unfortunately. So I got to go back. Got to go back sometime and take some time to do some more touring and sightseeing and see if I can see some of those animals. But had a blessed time being there with those pastors and church leaders, and I do hope to be able to go back sometime. If you're a regular listener to the show, you know I'm passionate about helping pastors and churches to thrive financially so they can accomplish the mission that God has given them. And if you're concerned about the level of giving in your church, like these pastors in Costa Rica were, maybe you're wondering how you could grow your giving within the church, or maybe pursue alternative revenue streams. Or maybe you're thinking maybe it's time for you yourself to begin to create income outside the church, but just not sure, is it really possible or where to begin? Well, I'd love to have a conversation with you and help you clarify what your next step might be. And if you want to have that conversation, you can schedule a free call with me, and you can do that on my website at morethanapastor.com/coaching. Hey, I always love it when I get emails and feedback from blog readers or podcast or YouTube listeners and viewers. And today's episode is inspired by a reader named Gary. And he wrote an email. And he said, "Hey, Rich, your blog says, send me an email, so I am." Thanks, Gary. This past Sunday, our pastor preached a sermon using the Wesley quote, "Make all you can, save all you can, and give all you can." And after the sermon and then reading your blog post about it, I wondered 2 things. Number 1, make all you can. If we put this into practice, wouldn't that mean that no Christian would ever go into the ministry or say like into the teaching profession, because they could make more money in other fields. So couldn't a person use this principle of make all you can to avoid God's calling them to a lower paying profession? Interesting question, Gary. And the second point he had was this. I've always felt a huge tension between save all you can and give all you can, because the more a person does of one, the less they have for the other, it seems. So how do I justify saving for the future instead of just trusting God with it and give it all away instead? So maybe make all you can, save all you can, give all you can is a nice aphorism, but it doesn't feel very practical to me. Gary, thanks so much for taking the time to write and to share your question. I really appreciate it, and you asked some great questions here. And I, too, have felt this tension, and I'm sure others who are listening or watching this or reading have felt the same tensions as well. And it was really in Wesley's sermon entitled The Use of Money, where he famously encouraged his listeners to gain all you can, save all you can, and give all you can. And so the question you ask is a good one. Is this good advice for us? Is it even applicable for pastors or Christians today? Well, here are my thoughts. Number one, I don't believe that make all you can necessarily means pursuing the highest paying career option that's available to us. In fact, when we look at John Wesley's life, we see that he preached mostly to who? To the poor, to the uneducated, to people who were working on the docks, in the ocean port towns. He preached to the coal miners. He preached to the people working out in the farm fields. So I don't think that he was imploring them to become doctors or lawyers or something else instead. I think he was talking to them in the context of who they were and what they were doing and what they had capacity to do. And so I take make all you can to be an invitation to be a good steward of all that God has entrusted to us, all the resources that he has put at our disposal. I think about the assets that we have, like our skills, our know-how, our experiences, our talents, our spiritual gifts, and that maybe it's more about him using them and us using them in a way that produces as much of an increase as we can within reason. And I say within reason because Wesley also spoke against wearing ourselves out. Don't pursue riches and wear yourself out in the process. But to the extent that you can create income, maximize that ability, maximize that potential within reason, not to wear yourself out, not that it causes you to love money and pursue it for its sake only, but it's for the use of others. So using pastors as an example, we have a ton of skills. We have a bunch of resources. We have so many things that I think can be leveraged into extra income outside the church. Each week, just for example, each week pastors create sermons or lessons for our own congregations. And my question is it good stewardship just to use that once for your own congregation? Or would there be a way that you could package those sermons together or those lessons and create books or workshops or other things that could produce income or just could bless people with them, whether they produced an income or not? So that's just one example where I think God has given us resources that we could maximize, we could use in other ways that could create an increase in some way, and perhaps a monetary increase as well. If nothing else, an increase in audience, an increase in people hearing the message and being impacted by it. And that's exactly what John Wesley did. He turned his sermons into pamphlets, which were sold, and he generated a substantial income from that. Or maybe, there's other ways to, maybe it's not just the things we've produced in our sermons, but we have other skills or talents, things we can do with our hands, maybe carpentry, building, who knows. Or even like for me, rental property has been a passion of mine in the past, and so pursuing that. So there are other ways we can pursue making as much as we can that are outside of working in the church. And so it's not just about pursuing a specific career, I think, that maximizes our income, but but serving God in the ways He's created us and gifted us for, and looking for ways that we can maximize our income through those things or other things as well. So those are some of my thoughts regarding your first point. And your second point on the tension between saving all we can and giving all we can, that's a great insight, a great point as well. 20 years ago, I began to be mentored by a very wealthy man in our church. And he was a financial advisor, and he managed the wealth of several millionaires in our community. I think he had to have at least $1 million to work with him. Like, he really worked with managing large amounts of wealth for his clients. And he and his wife early on realized that they themselves were going to create a significant income from doing this. Working with high dollar people, they were going to produce a high amount of income for themselves. And they were really challenged to realize that not everything that God would bless them with was meant to stay with them, but that He wanted them to give. And so they decided to set a limit of how much they were going to live on. And then they set a savings limit as well, like for short-term and long-term savings, how much they wanted to save. And then beyond those things, they wanted to just give and give and give and give beyond those. Once they set those limits, then everything else was surplus that could be given away. And I really felt like that was a very Wesleyan thing to do, because John Wesley did the same thing. He lived in the late 1816, early 1700s, and he came to a point in his life when he realized that he should limit his lifestyle so that he could increase his giving, so he could save more and give more. And it was back in the year 1731. He was earning 30 pounds a year. Again, he lived in England. They used the pound. He was earning 30 pounds a year, but his living expenses were 28 pounds a year. So he had a surplus of 2 pounds that he was able to give away. Well, the next year, his income doubled to 60 pounds, but he didn't increase his living expenses. He kept them at 28. So now he had 32 pounds to give away. The next year, his income increased to 90 pounds, and you guessed it, he kept his living expenses at 28 pounds and had 62 pounds to give away. So I believe that we have the ability to honor God in all three, in making all that we can, not wearing ourselves out and pursuing riches for their sake, but just being good stewards of the resources, the skills, abilities God's given us, make all we can, and then save all we can and determine, okay, God, how much do you want us to save for us? And then how much do you want us to free up to give, to be a blessing for other people in our community and world? Because I believe it honors God when we steward those resources He's given us, when we make conscious decisions of how He wants us to live, and at what point we should have a lifestyle limit, and then how much should we save, how much should we give. And I think it honors Him when we have long-term savings. He wants us to provide for our families, to meet our own needs, to provide for our families, and to be a blessing, to give out of our abundance. And sometimes He invites us to give sacrificially to help meet the needs of others as well. And I think God invites us. He knows that there's tension in those three things, and I believe that He promises to meet us there. He invites us into the tension, and He wants to meet us there, and to be guided by His Holy Spirit to make those decisions, and to say, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do? How much do you want me to earn? What is a good lifestyle limit for us? How much would you like us to save for the future? And how much would you want us to give? And so, do you have like giving goals? Like, do you have savings goals for your family? Do you have giving goals of how much you'd like to give away? And that was something that has been new to me, I guess, the last few years, to think, what more could I do to give away? What passions am I interested about? Like if I could double my income, what would I give to? If I could triple my income, what would I give to? And so sometimes I think when we dream big about the kind of impact we want to have, maybe it changes our thinking in terms of our savings and in terms of our production, our income, and in thinking of, okay, how could I accomplish that? And maybe it's not just through earning income, maybe it's through partnerships and other sorts of things. But I think when we dream big about giving, God helps us to see other areas where we could produce more. We can produce more of an increase. And I faced that personal challenge maybe like 25 years ago. I remember doing a spiritual gift assessment in our church, and I was surprised that giving was ranked really high, like faith and giving were like in my top 3 of my spiritual gift mix. And I was thinking, okay, that sounds kind of weird to me. I mean, I'm interested in giving. I find joy in giving. I love to give. But the description, when I read what does the gift of giving mean, it was not just the joy of giving, but it was the ability to produce the surplus to be able to give. In that definition I read, it was both and. It was 2 things together: the ability to produce and then the joy of being able to give away. And I asked myself, okay, I'm a pastor. I'm in a church. My income is pretty fixed. I don't, you can't like get paid to work overtime typically. You don't have any opportunities, like some pastors can, yes, have opportunities to maybe speak at a conference ground or something like that, or a guest speak at a church sometime. But for the most part, my income was fixed. I didn't have a lot of control over growing my income within the church. And I began to think, oh, what about growing income outside the church? And then I realized, okay, maybe God has planted those seeds within me for entrepreneurship. I've always had these dreams of entrepreneurship. Maybe it is so I can produce more, not just to provide for my family, but so I can give more and have a bigger impact than I could through my regular income from the church. And so that was a tension or something I wrestled with like 25 years ago. Lord, why do I have the spiritual gift of giving if I'm in a position that, is not like, I'm not making 6 figures, my income is pretty limited. We have 5 kids. And so that was really interesting to think, how could I create income beyond my church income so that I could give more? So anyway, that was just something that the Lord revealed to me, that I had skills, talents, abilities that He had given me, other ways that I could produce income, and not just like actively like through job sorts of things or side gigs, but through passive income, like owning real estate and having rental houses. Those have been other ways for us to produce income that are more passive. I mean, sometimes they're not as passive as you wish they could be, when you've got to unplug a toilet or fix electrical or fix a broken window or a broken door latch or something. But anyway, I began to think more about passive sorts of income opportunities as well. So Gary, that's how I take that Wesley quote. And I think we can all apply this as we seek to steward the resources, the skills, abilities, and talents that God has given us. So, Gary, thanks again for taking the time to write and for checking out my blog. I really appreciate it. And hey, listening friend, if you have a question, if you've got feedback on this or any other episode, I invite you to do what Gary did. I invite you to send me an email and let me know. You can email me at rich@morethanapastor.com. And maybe I'll feature your question in a future episode as well. Well, hey, that's it for today's show. Thanks again for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And again, if you want to check out the blog post for this episode, you can go to morethanapastor.com/68 for episode 68. And if you want to book a free coaching call with me, you'll find the link for that there as well. Hey, until next time, remember that you are more than a pastor. Saying yes to God's call doesn't mean you have to say yes to feeling stuck, broke, or unfulfilled in your life and ministry. Let's work together and help you create the life, impact, and income that you were made for.